Oop, hold on a second. Let's make sure we got the camera right. Alrighty, there we go. Sorry about for the little delay. As you can see, I have one of our physical copies of the book that we're going through, Hatchet by Gary Paulsen. Yes, I had to go analog and not digital, as I put my iPad down somewhere in the building, and I gotta find it. But we have copies of these books available, so just like I'm holding here, if you want to go through the book with us, please come join us. Stop by the club, 250 North Springer Street, and we'll have some copies available. Just a reminder, in about 30 minutes, we're going to be starting serving our supper. We have supper that just arrived here, hot and fresh and good to go from Fazoli's. We thank you so much for our community partners that have been joining with us during this time to help us get meals out there. So we have some nice Fazoli's that'll be available. But we left off this morning. We're going through chapter 11. And if you want to watch any of our previous book readings, all previous 11, they're on our Facebook page and they're up on our YouTube page as well. Please follow us. Please join us. If you're tuning in, please hit that share button. Go ahead, drop an emoji, send a wave, send some communication. We want to connect with you while we're all at home. But going to be starting chapter 12 of the book Hatchet. Now, if we remember at the end of chapter 11, he was really formalizing his plans to understand, hey, I can make food. And not just food, I could find some fish. So how am I going to find this fish? We remember that he's being so resilient. He's found some eggs and he's eating the eggs. And even though they tasted disgusting, he knows that they're good and he could eat them. But now he has fish on his mind. He saw some clams, he saw some small fish, and he said, hey, it's time to get to hunting. And he's going to try to get him some fish. So here we join in on chapter 12. Let's see where his resiliency and determination takes him and see if there's another obstacle that he could overcome. So, chapter 12, let's begin. The fish spear didn't work. He stood in the shallows and waited again and again. The small fish came closer and closer, and he lunged time after time, but was always too slow. He tried throwing it, jabbing it, everything but flailing with it, and it didn't work. The fish were just too fast. He had been so sure, so absolutely certain that it would work the night before. Sitting by the fire, he had taken the willow and carefully peeled the bark back until he had a straight staff about 6 feet long and just under an inch thick at the base, the thickest end. Then, propping the hatchet in a crack in the rock in the wall, he had pulled the head of his spear against it, carving a thin piece off each time, until the thick end tapered down to a needle point. Still not satisfied, he could not imagine hitting one fish with a single point. He carefully used the hatchet to split the point up the middle for 8 or 10 inches and jammed a piece of wood up into the split to make a 2-pronged spear with the points about 2 inches apart. It was crude, but it looked effective and seemed to have good balance when he stood outside the shelter and hefted the spear. He had worked on the fish spear until it had become more than just a tool. He spent hours and hours on it, and now it didn't work. He moved into the shallows and stood, and the fish just came to him, just as before. They swarmed around his legs, some of them almost 6 inches long. But no matter how he tried, they were too fast. At first he tried throwing it, but that had no chance. As soon as he brought his arm back, well before he threw, the movement frightened him. Next he tried lunging at them, having the spear ready just above the water and thrusting it with it. Finally, he actually put the spear in the water and waited until the fish were right in front of it. But somehow he telegraphed his motion before he thrust, and then he saw them flashed away. He needed something to spring the spear forward, some way to make it move faster than the fish, some motive force, a string that snapped, or a bow and arrow. A thin, long arrow with a point in the water, and he pulled the bow back so that all he had to do was release the arrow. Yes, that was it. He had to invent the bow and arrow. He almost laughed as he moved out the water and put his shoes on. The morning sun was getting hot, and he took his shirt off. Maybe that's how it really happened, way back when. Some primitive man tried to spear fish, and it didn't work, and he invented the bow and arrow. Maybe it was always that way. Discoveries happen because they needed to happen. He had not eaten anything yet this morning, so he took a moment to dig up the eggs and eat one. Then he reburied them, banked the fire with a couple of thicker pieces of wood, settled the hatchet on his belt, and took the spear in his right hand and set off to the lake to find wood to make a bow. He went without a shirt, but something about the wood smoke smell on him kept the insects from bothering him as he walked to the berry patch. The raspberries were starting to become overripe. Just in 2 days, he'd have to pick as many as possible after he found the wood, but he did take a little time now to pick a few and eat them. They were full and sweet, and when he picked one, 2 others would fall off the limbs into the grass, and soon his hands and cheeks were covered with red berry juice, and he was full. That surprised him, being full. He hadn't thought he would ever feel full again, knew only the hunger, and here he was full. 1 turtle egg and a few handful of berries, and he felt full. He looked down at his stomach and saw that it was still caved in. Did not bulge out as it would have if he had 2 hamburgers and a freezy slush. It must have shrunk. There was still hunger there, but not like it was, not tearing at him. This was hunger that he knew would be there always, even when he had food. A hunger that made him look for things, see things. A hunger that made him hunt. He swung his eyes across the berries to make sure the bear wasn't there at his back. Then he moved down to the lake. The spear went out before him automatically, moving the brush away from his face as he walked. And when he came to the water's edge, he swung left, not sure what he was looking for, not knowing what wood may be best for a bow. He had never made a bow, never shot a bow in his life, but it seemed that it would be along the lake near the water. He saw some young birch, and they were springy, but they lacked snap somehow, as did the willows, not enough whipback. Halfway up the lake, as he started to step over a log, he was absolutely terrified by an explosion underneath his feet. Something like a feathered bomb blew up and away in a flurry of leaves and thunder. It frightened him so badly that he fell back down, and then it was gone, leaving only an image in his mind. A bird. It had been about the size of a very small chicken, only with a fantail and stubby wings that slammed against its body and made loud noise. Noise there and gone. He got up and brushed himself off. The bird had been speckled, brown and gray, and it must not have been very smart because Brian's foot had been nearly on it before it flew. Half a second more and he would have stepped on it. And caught it, he thought, and eaten it. He might be able to catch one or spear one. Maybe, he thought, maybe it tasted like chicken. Maybe he could catch one and spear it. And probably it did taste just like chicken. Just like chicken when his mother baked it in the oven with garlic and salt and it turned golden brown and crackled. He shook his head to drive the pitcher out and move down the shore. There was a tree there with long branches that seemed straight, and when he pulled on one of them and let it go, it had almost a vicious snap to it. He picked one of the limbs that seemed right and began chopping the limb where it joined the tree. The wood was hard, and he didn't want to cause it to split, so he took his time. He took small chips and concentrated so hard at first that he didn't hear it. A persistent whine, like the insects, only more steady, with an edge of a roar to it, was in his ears, and when he chopped and cut and thinking about a bow and how he could make a bow, how it would be when he shaped it into the hatchet, and still the sound did not cut through until the limb was nearly off the tree. And the sound was inside of his head, and he knew it. A plane! It was a motor, far off, but seeming to get louder. They were coming for him. He threw down the limb in despair, and holding the hatchet, he started to run for camp. He had to get the fire up on the bluff and signal them. Get fire and smoke up. He put all his life into his legs, jumped logs and moved through brush like a light ghost, swiveling and running, his lungs filling and blowing, and now the sound was louder coming in his direction. If not right at him, at least closer. He could see it all in his mind now, the picture, the way it would be. He would get the fire going, the plane would see the smoke and circle once, and then again, and waggle its wings. It'd be a float plane that would have to land on the water and come across the lake, and the pilot would be amazed that he was alive after all these days. All this he saw as he ran for the camp and the fire. They would take him from here, and this night, this very night, he would sit with his father and eat and tell him all the things. He could see it now. Oh yes, all as he ran in the sun, his legs liquid springs. He got to the camp, still hearing the whine of the engine, and one stick of wood still had good flame. He dove inside and grabbed the wood, ran around the edge of the ridge, scrambled up like a cat, and blew, and nearly had the flame feeding and growing when the sound moved away. It was abrupt, as if the plane had turned. He shielded the sun from his eyes and tried to see it, tried to make the plane become real in his eyes, but the trees were so high, so thick, and now the sound was still fainter. He kneeled again, and the flames blew, and added grass and chips, and the flames fed and grew, and in moments he had a bonfire as high as his head, but the sound was gone now. Look back, he thought. Look back and see the smoke. Now, and turn, please. Look back, he whispered, feeling all the pictures fade, seeing his father's face fade like the sound, like lost dreams, like an end to hope. Oh, turn now, come back, look back and see the smoke and turn for me. But it kept moving away until he could not hear it, even in his imagination, in his soul, gone. He stood on the bluff over the lake, his face cooking in the roaring bonfire, watching the clouds of ash and smoke going into the sky, and thought no more than thought. He knew then he would not get out of this place. Not now, not ever. That had been a church plane. He was sure of it. They must have been them. They had come as far off the side of the flat plane as they thought they would have to come, and then turned back. They did not see his smoke, did not hear the cry from his mind. They would not return. He would never leave now, never get out of here. He went down to his knees and felt the tears start, cutting through the smoke and ash on his face, silently falling onto the stone. Gone, he thought finally. It was all gone, all silly and gone. No bows, no spears or fish or berries. It was all silly anyways, all just a game. He could do a day, but not forever. He could not make it if they did not come for him someday. He could not play the game without hope, could not play the game without a dream. They had taken it all away from him now. They had turned away from him, and there was nothing for him now. The plane gone, his family gone, all of it gone. They would not comfort him. He was alone, and there was nothing for him. Whew. That's tough. That is tough. I mean, can you imagine to be filled with so much hope and encouragement and then to see it all thrown away? I mean, we've said one thing, that Brian, up until this point in this chapter, has been very resilient. He's showcased the determination and the knowledge and the perseverance that has gotten him to this point and helped him survive these many days. But on that moment when he has hope seemingly right within his grasp and it's all gone, he's feeling hopeless. What do we do in those moments when life seems to challenge us in such a way that we think we have no other choice? Well, I know the answer, but I can tell you, you got to tune in to find out, because we get hot and juicy with chapter 13. We're going to find out tomorrow morning what is going on. How is this happening? How can we make sure that we find out if Brian's going to find some food? He can't fish with the spear. The plane came. Who knows if they're going to send another plane? So you got to tune in to find out. Hope you do. So please know, we're serving lunch, supper from 3:30 to 5:30. It's Fazoli's tonight. Come out, grab a meal, and grab a copy of the book if you need be. Tomorrow morning, we'll start bright and early at 12 noon. We'll start with chapter 13. And then we'll serve supper from 12 to 1, lunch, getting it backwards, from 12 to 1:30 as well. So, thank you. Please share. Please tell your family members that we're going through this book. We're almost done. We're starting chapter 13, and I believe there's only 8 more chapters to go after that. And so, we're past the halfway point. I'm excited to see what happens, and I know you are too. I'll see you tomorrow, bright and early at 12 noon.